All right, welcome to FIRESafe Marin's new webinar series. My name's Rich Shortall, the FIRESafe Marin Executive Coordinator. FIRESafe Marin plans to host one webinar each month, usually on the last Tuesday of the month. Please go to the FIRESafe Marin website to subscribe to our newsletter for more information. The webinar series is created with input from the members of our educational committee, including representatives from fire agencies, environmental groups, UC Marin Master Gardeners, and various subject matter experts. It is designed to help you understand and prepare for the threat of wildfire here in Marin. If we all do our part, we can minimize risks and save lives and property. Tonight, we will first hear from Marin County Fire Division Chief Mark Brown. Chief Brown has served in senior command positions at many of the major North Bay fires, including the Paradise fires. He will address the impact of climate change on wildfire behavior and its relationship to fire risk in Marin County. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions of Chief Brown when he is finished. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and you will provide your questions in writing. Any questions that we cannot address during tonight's presentation, they will be answered, and the answer will be posted on the FIRESafe Marin website, where you also will be able to find a recording of tonight's presentation. Chief Brown will be followed by Marin County Supervisor Katie Rice. Supervisor Rice will provide an overview of the activities of the new Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which was created by the recent passage of Measure C. The supervisor will also take follow-up questions. We're going to conclude the webinar with some suggested actions that you can take right now that will help make yourself safer in the event of a wildfire. Following our 1-hour webinar, we will provide an additional 15 minutes of question and answer for all of our panelists. So we're going to start tonight's presentation with a short video.
In the western United States, I believe something like 5 or 6 states within the last 10 years have had the largest wildfires they've ever had on record. Fires which exceed any of the kind of previous experience we've had with the size, intensity, ferocity of fires up until this last decade or so.
As the heavy cloud of smoke parked over much of LA and beyond, blocking the sun, making the air so thick, air quality officials issued a smoke advisory.
What's going on in the background of all of this is you have climate change, which is constantly pushing the conditions to be drier, the fuels to be drier, the weather to be more extreme.
Well, you can feel the heat. Holy shit.
There just simply aren't enough firefighters to help fight this fire because of the sheer number of fires and also the size.
We're seeing large fires in landscapes born and bred of fire now being destroyed by fire.
Good evening. My name is Mark Brown. As Rich mentioned, I have the honor to serve as the Deputy Fire Chief for the Marin County Fire Department. And as I was thinking about how to best describe to everybody what or how we got to today's fire environment, it dawned on me that we really have three failures that are disguised as successes. The first one is our total fire suppression policies that we adopted way back in 1910. And California ecology needs fire to be healthy, and we've interrupted that cycle. And so we've created unhealthy forests. We've tried to let those fires burn at times if they were lightning caused fires and they were in a location where it was safe for them to burn. But if there's a structure threat or a life threat, then we have to go and suppress that fire, which furthers the problem. The next success that is really a failure is the success of pushing people further and further into the wildland, living in the wildland urban interface. And quite honestly, where there are people, there are ignitions. When there's ignitions, we're going to have fire. And where there are people, we have to suppress that fire. So therefore, we're continuing the damage to our forests. And then we get to the most important failure, or a series of some successes, and that is creating our industry, creating our transportation, and our power generation. All of these successes of humankind have they've been a failure to the environment, and through the increase of carbon emissions and what they have done to add to our climate change. And just to give it really succinctly, in California, our fire season has increased by about 75 days a year. So that's more than 2 months a year that we have increased fire season. And therefore, we obviously have more opportunity for fire, but almost as important as that is that the fuels, the vegetation out there just doesn't have the time to recover, doesn't have time to bring in that moisture, and it doesn't have that time to be healthy. So we've created this really vicious cycle. And, as a fire service, we were almost staying ahead of the explosive nature of this new fire environment. Starting in 2013 and a few fires before that, we started to really tip that scale over to where we're not keeping up anymore. The Rim Fire was a notable fire in 2013, and a lot of people looked at that fire and went, well, that's kind of an anomaly. Then we had the King Fire and several other just mega fires. And again, people were kind of looking at, are those one-offs, or is this a big change? And for me, my personal experience, really it struck me in 2015 when I was on a Rocky Fire, and I was looking at a patch of vegetation that was burning. Fortunately, there were no homes, no threats. And, the energy that I saw coming off of that vegetation was far more energy than I've ever seen come off of that volume of fire. And it's the fuel loading, and then it's just how stressed the fuels are from the climate change, from the increase in fire season, from the drought. And then we had the Valley Fire, and watching the Valley Fire burn 60,000 acres in 6 hours, and just run through Middletown and into Napa. And then we had the Sobranas Fire in 2016, and that's a spot that they have fires in that area where the Sobranas Fire occurred every 8 years. And that fire just completely exceeded what normally happens in that area. The Detweiler Fire, I'm going to mention here in a little bit, talking about history. But then we had the North Bay fires with the Tubbs, the Nuns, I'm sorry, but Atlas Peak Fire, and so many other fires that have occurred. And the extreme fire behavior, and you compare it to previous fires like that. Then the Thomas Fire in LA, we have red flag conditions day after day after day in December. And then we all know about the Camp Fire and what it did, and the Kincaid Fire. We can go on and on about these lists. And I think it's the reason why I bring them up is because knowing our fire history is so very important. If you want to predict the future, especially in fire, you look at the past. And if it happened before in the past, it's going to happen again. And even with our so-called improved fire suppression capabilities, we're not doing as well as in suppressing those fires as we did in the past. I'll use the Detweiler Fire as one example. When we arrived there with the incident management team I'm assigned to, we were told this fire never jumps this road. Well, it jumped that road at 3 o'clock in the morning. Then we were told this fire never jumps the highway. It jumped the highway. It jumped the river they told us it never jumps. It jumped the ridge that they told us it never jumps. And then we have the tubs, and let's compare the tubs with the Hanley fire in 1964. It burned almost the identical footprint that the 1964 Hanley fire did. However, in 1964, it took 2.5 days to burn that footprint. In 2017, it took 6 hours to burn that footprint. So we're keeping kind of the fire's width the same. It's the length and intensity and how fast it does burn that way. So let's look at Marin fire history. Like I said, if you want to predict the future, look at the past. 1923, Ignacio to Bolinas. Think about that. A fire that started in Ignacio burned all the way to Bolinas. And by the way, that was the same night that a fire that not a lot of people talk about was a predecessor to the Hanley fire. Almost the same fire in 1923 occurred in 1964 and then occurred in 2017. Now look at the footprint of what is in from Ignacio to Bolinas between 1923 and now. What kind of damage are we going to see through there? The 1929 Mill Valley fire, the 1945 Mill fire, which is where Kent Lake and was burning into the Mount Tam watershed, and then the 1995 Vision fire. If you take those fires and look at their footprints and know that those footprints are going to get filled so much faster and have so many more lives threatened. But you know, I'm talking about these large fires, and that really is only 0.01% of the fires that we see. So I think we really need to focus on the smaller fires, because if we all prepare for the smaller fires, that actually sets us up success for that large fire. And how I mean by that is we need you to prepare your home to survive a small fire by itself. Because the speed of a fire is, it can get to homes so much faster than our fire engines can. And I'll use a fire that we had last year off of Highway 37 near the Petaluma River Bridge. From the time of the report to the time that the fire was impacting homes, and it was impacting dozens of homes at once, was 7 minutes. We can't get a dozen fire engines to that location within 7 minutes. And so we need your home to be able to defend itself. So if you make that defensible space where your home can defend itself for the little fires, that means we have an even better chance to save that home under the big fires. And if everyone does their piece as a community, then everyone is more safe. So please work on your defensible space. And then preparedness. We all have to be ready. We have to know that fires are going to occur. So you need to be signing up for your notification systems. Alertmarin.org is one of the most important things you can do. Sign up for your notifications so you can know when we are asking you to take action. And then the Ready, Set, Go program, and you can learn more about it from readymarin.org. Quite honestly, in Marin, or in California and Marin specifically, we should always be in the ready mode. If it's summertime, we need to be in the ready mode because of wildland fires. If it's wintertime, we need to be in the ready mode because of floods. And year round, we kind of need to be in the ready mode because we're in earthquake country. So then set, that's when you know that there's some weather conditions that may be conducive for fire, or you know that there's a fire. That's when you have your go bag near your door, or maybe you've started packing some of your stuff in your car. And then go, that's when you receive a notification through our notification systems, whether it's Alert Marin or the WIA or the Wireless Emergency Alerting System, Amber Alert System, or any other type of notification system. When you get that notification, we need you to go. And then most importantly is there's a situational awareness that if you're living in Marin, if you're living in the wildland urban interface, there's a situational awareness that you need to have. You need to be aware of where you live in regards to terrain. What kind of wildland fuel is around your house, and how is it oriented with the terrain, and can that funnel with the wind and get to your house so quick, super quick? What are the road conditions? Is there road construction that's going on during your escape route? Again, have that knowledge. You can always be thinking in your head, how am I going to get out of here if the worst happens? And then you really need to be in tune with the weather conditions. And if you start seeing red flags popping up and you're seeing fires in our vicinity, that's when you need to be ready to go. So, Rich, I think that's what I have for you. And if you want to fire away some questions at me.
Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate that. Just as a reminder to the participants, if you have questions for Chief Brown or later for Supervisor Rice, please use the Q&A function over there, and that's the way we'll be able to respond to you. But just to get our questioning started, my first question is, with all that experience, what's the most important thing that you have learned about wildfire safety?
The number one thing that's really been driven in my head is we need to fight fire before it starts. It's just been proven time and time again that if we wait for the fire to start for us to take some type of action, then we're too late. We just can't keep up with how fast these fires are burning. So, and it really takes a community effort. All our neighbors, the fire departments, law enforcement, emergency managers, FIRESafe MARIN, and now the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, we all need to work as a team and help our forest become a little bit more healthy, improve our escapes routes, evacuation routes now. We all need to have a plan in case the fire starts, and then that way when the fire does start, we'll be that much safer.
Great, thank you. One more question. What is the most important things that residents should be doing when wildfire strikes?
Well, I'm actually going to go back to my theme, Rich, and that is they really need to start before the fire happens. So that's their defensible space work that they do around their home, the evacuation planning, and signing up for notification systems. Then they need to stay engaged in their environment. They need to know if there is a fire that is near them, and then they need to follow the notification instructions that we give. And there's some, after you sign up for Alert Marin, there's about 3 different notifications that we may give you. One of them is shelter in place. The other is an evacuation warning. The last one is evacuation order. And a shelter in place is something we're probably going to give pretty early because when the fire is small, it's still survivable for the community members. And if we start having mass exodus before we get any of the fire engines in there, we actually may not be able to suppress the fire. So in the early stages, we may actually give it a shelter in place. And then that evacuation warning, that means within a couple hours, we expect to turn that into an evacuation order. So evacuation warning, that's when you should be loading up your car. Evacuation order, that's when you need to go. But for our members who have access and functional needs, they may want to evacuate much sooner.
Okay, great. So let's take a few of the questions that are coming in from the participants. First one is, are most fires caused by humans like PG&E? And if so, what can we do to prevent this?
Most fires, especially in Marin, where we don't have a lot of lightning, yes, fires are caused, but where there are people, there are fires, whether it's negligent people starting the fire or the infrastructure that supports us. So, you know, we'll get quite a few fires each year from people mowing and thinking mowing is a good thing, which, you know, we want people to improve their defensible space, but they'll go out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a hot day, hit a rock with their mower and start a fire. So again, it's all about awareness and, you know, keep your mechanical equipment around your home in good working order. Know when you should mow, know when you should do anything that can create a heat spark, and just be cognizant of your surroundings.
All right, next question. Can we use our pool, pond, or water tank to wet our property in the event of an oncoming fire?
That's a great question, and it's something that we see a lot. And without going into a long-winded conversation, unless you're putting that water on the ground as the embers are landing, watering the house, watering the terrain around your house does absolutely no good. The water will dissipate, and the effect that it can have to keep an ember from turning into a spot fire is going to go away within minutes.
So here's another question. Can you explain shelter in place? What do we do to keep safe in our homes?
Well, that's a really good question. Again, and that's all part of having a plan and knowing your house. And so if you are sheltering in place, if you have light window coverings, open them. If you have nice solid blinds, heavy blinds, close them. Have all your doors unlocked so you know how you can get out. If there is a power outage, or you don't have a battery in your garage door open, or have your garage door open, if your car is in your garage, have it loaded and ready to go. and then know what side the fire is coming from. And if your safest place during that situation is actually in your house. But if your house somehow ignites, then you go to what we call the lee side of the house, where you're at, so the opposite side from which the fire is coming.
Okay, so here's another one. Is there a role, and what is it, for controlled burns?
I think there's a tremendous role, and again, it's part of reintroducing fire into our environment. However, smoke in the air scares people, and we're gonna, but it has such an important role for us, and we just need to do it at the right time, under the right conditions, in the right situation. And I do think that it's going to help create an increase in our health of our forests. And I think it's something that we need to bring back into Marin.
So here's another one. This is a person who lives in Fairfax, and they want to know if there are any consultants or other people who could come and take a look at the defensible space on their property and advise them how to get it better prepared.
Firefighters love going out and talking to the community. So for sure, definitely reach out to your local fire department. One of the things I get to do is I get to be the deputy chief, not just for Marin County Fire, but Ross Valley Fire as well. So I know that Ross Valley Fire will be there to support. As also, we have defensible space inspectors that, or evaluators that are going throughout the entire Ross Valley, the entire county, and we are hitting areas of Fairfax. So if your home doesn't get evaluated, please give our fire station a call. We'll get someone up there to look at it for you.
Great. As you know, there's kind of a move to install more of these so-called high-low or outdoor warning sirens in Marin. Mill Valley has a program, and some other communities are considering that. The question is, how do we know if those sirens go off that we're supposed to evacuate? Is that their function? And what if they're in a neighboring town and not our town? Are we supposed to evacuate? How's all that supposed to work?
And that's where we need to have a robust communications continuum. And that, what I mean by that is a bunch of pieces of our communication system working together, because what does a siren mean? Does it impact me? And so if you hear that siren, you need to be able to look into your resources that you have, whether it's Alert Marin, because if the siren's going off, you're also getting Alert Marin notifications. And then you can log into your local fire department with whether it's a Twitter feed, Facebook feed, Marin County Office of Emergency Services, and gather that information. And most importantly, you might need to just step outside, take a look around, and see what your environment is. And if your environment's safe, then you should stay there. If your environment isn't safe, then you should leave.
Great. Here's another very common question, and that involves locked gates, oftentimes on private property, and very frequently going onto fire roads. Are those a valuable option for evacuation?
I rarely like to use absolute terms and don't like to use the word of never or always. This is as close as I'll get to an absolute term. Going uphill from a fire on a fire road through a locked gate is almost always a really bad idea. Fire wants to burn uphill. It's going to go up that hill faster than you can, and most of our fire roads are going through terrain where the fuels and the terrain align for the absolute worst fire behavior. And I know this question is usually generated out of people who live in, and a lot of Marin lives in one way in, one way out communities. And so they look at that fire road that's going up and out as their safest way out. Firefighters never go up away from a fire. We always go down. And that's why it's important that we all participate in making sure our evacuation routes are clear and that our homes have defensible space. And that's where, when you are evacuating, you have to be nimble. You have to be able to stop. And when roads get blocked from fire, rarely are they blocked for that long. And so you have to have a safe place that you can kind of stand back and wait for the fire to go by you. And when it's safe, then you can go through, rather than trying to go uphill out where it's going to put you in the most dangerous place for the fire.
Great, thank you. So this is another common one. How effective are these home sprinkler or gel and foam systems and whatnot? Is that something you'd recommend?
Under certain circumstances, I would recommend that. Under many circumstances, again, I've been to most of the wild and urban interface fires that I've been to that have devastated a neighborhood or neighborhoods, the water system has failed. And the reason why the water system has failed is that you have a 1/2 inch to a 3/4 inch water supply that's going into the home. The home burns down, and now you have just an open 1/2 inch spigot of water spewing out. When you have hundreds of homes that are burning, then the water system fails. And then the firefighters have no water to use. And then if you have a sprinkler system, what's your guarantee that the water is actually going to hit where it needs to hit? It's usually going to be under very windy conditions, so the sprinklers have limited success with the sprinklers. But I don't want to say it's not ever a good idea. And a lot of the gel systems and foam systems are designed well, and they have they're longer lasting than just pure water. So it's not an absolute answer. You really need to get an expert in there to evaluate that particular situation.
Great. Another issue that comes up is as people are learning more and more about ember showers, which are created in these firestorms, a real vulnerability in homes are the foundation vents. Is there a way to deal with that?
Absolutely, and you follow FIRESafe MARIN is a tremendous resource. Go into FIRESafe MARIN and dig in there, and you'll see the vents that are recommended. They're minimum or at max 1/8 inch opening, honeycomb, double weave, so the embers can't get into your basement. Vulcan vent is one of the brands, but there's many other brands where you can get those vents that won't allow the embers in.
Great. As we know, the likelihood of having a catastrophic fire is going to be on a red flag warning day, particularly relative to somebody's car, like having gas in it, what direction should be parked in. Are there some steps that people should be taking on red flag warning days to better prepare themselves in case they do need to evacuate?
Absolutely, you hit on one of them, and that is no less than a 1/2 tank of fuel, preferably topped off, 3/4 to full. Be prepared, and it's a community effort as well. Know your neighbors. Know where you might have some people that have access and functional needs, and perhaps you want to help. And have your go bag either by the door or in your car. Have your pets, a plan for your pets to be able to get your pets out. Have pet carriers, and then know where you're going to go. Are you going to go to a shelter, or are you going to go to a friend or family members?
So speaking of cars, if you happen to get stuck in traffic, is it a good idea to get out of your car and run for it?
No. Your car is going to be far safer, even if you're stopped, than getting out into the environment. You have so much more protection in the car. And now if you have the ability to move up, move backwards, left and right, that's going to help. But the only time that I would ever recommend getting out of your car is if your car starts burning.
Yeah. So how about car versus walking out or riding your bicycle?
You know, communities that have set up footpaths for escape routes because of the known road networks, I think that's a viable option. Mill Valley's done a great job of setting up their pass and trail network. But that has to be something that is pre-planned, and you know that that's your route of escape, and that you know that you can get from your starting point to a safe refuge area faster than the fire can.
There's several questions relating to the fact that, as we know in the last power safety shutoff, a lot of the cell towers went down. They either had no battery backup or it didn't last very long. How are we still to be able to get alert Marin warnings when that happens?
One of the things that's really positive right now is legislation that's going to require 3-day or 72-hour backup. So that's going to be very helpful. FIRESafe MARIN also has, Rich, the weather radio project going on, and so that's a system that will always be able to work. Sirens will be helpful with that, and then traditional landlines. Maintaining traditional landline at your home is good too. However, there are some we came across some problems with those too, that the substations batteries backups weren't working. But that's why you have to have more than one way to be notified.
There's several questions related sort of to the overall concept of evacuation planning. And some of it has to do with where do we go? How do we know to go there? What if we're dealing with COVID-19 when we get to one of these places? Has this been thought out? Are there plans? Do we need to bring in an expert to advise us on how to do planning for our neighborhood? What's the status of the overall evacuation planning?
Well, there's so many communities that have created FIREWISE communities, and they have banded together, educated themselves. And so if you live in a community that has a FIREWISE community, reach out to them, reach out to FIRESafe MARIN, reach out to your local fire department. And in Fairfax, Mill Valley, and Novato, and now Santa Rafael's, and eventually the entire county, we're working on it, is much improved evacuation maps for the residents. We have evacuation maps now, but they're great for firefighters to read. When some of our community members look at it, it's not as easy to read as it is for us. So we're making maps that are designed for the community member, that shows the evacuation routes, shows refuge areas, and shows where they can get to be safe.
Great. So back to cars again. Somebody says, I understand that modern cars have a cutoff on the fuel system when the air gets too hot, and that supposedly some of the cars in Paradise stopped running because of this cutoff. Is that true? And is that something we should be worried about?
I don't know a lot of I haven't heard that one, Rich. And I think if you're in that environment, you were probably in a really unsafe environment. But and our goal is to get you out of there before that happens. But I know of firefighters who've been far too close, and their vehicle did stop working for a short period of time. They let it cool off. They were able to restart and move on.
Great. So here's our last question, and I have to say it's one of the most common ones I hear when I do presentations, and that is, I do a very good job maintaining my property, but my neighbor or some other landowner doesn't do it. How are they to be motivated or required to do the same cleanup that I'm doing so we can all be safe?
Well, there's the $1 million question. And we hear it all summer long. And that's where, again, peer pressure really works well. Sometimes it only goes so far, we get that. And we are working on further incentivizing, both positively through education and perhaps down the road through stronger measures to make it happen. But right now, we're doing our best with it through the education route.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chief. We really appreciate that. For those of you who we didn't get to your answer, as I mentioned, we will provide written response to these questions on our website. And then at the end of tonight's webinar, the Chief and Supervisor Rice and myself will be available for another 15 minutes to try to maybe catch up on some of these questions and respond to some more. But I do want to thank you very much for taking the time to do this, Chief. It was really wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So with that said, I would like to introduce Supervisor Katie Rice. Supervisor Rice was one of the many leaders, played an important role in helping us to get Measure C passed, which created the new Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Some of you have heard about it, some of you don't know much about it. I'm personally very involved in myself, and I can tell you it's already doing a lot, and there's a lot of tax dollars at work. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Supervisor Rice.
Okay, hi Rich, hi Chief, hi folks out there. So glad that so many folks have tuned into this. And of course, now there's a siren going by. And I will try to be quick. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Wildfire Prevention Authority here in Marin County that was just established, and try to leave plenty of time for questions, which I suspect will mostly be for Chief Brown, because the Chief is always the star attraction in any of these events. But anyway, so a little bit quickly. So Chief Brown talked about our wildfire reality, and it's a new reality in that it's been exacerbated, our wildfire risk, by climate change and by the way our landscape has become a little bit overgrown and fire suppression. It's also our new reality in terms of our general awareness as we've seen fires nearby. The worst part about this, about our wildfire risk and our wildfire reality, is it's not going away for a long time. Unlike the pandemic, which we will hopefully see an end to in the not too distant future, we're going to be dealing with wildfire risk for a long time. And that's why all the work that we can do to reduce that risk is so important. And as Chief Brown said, you know, 99% of the fires that get ignited don't turn into these mega wildfires. So everything we can do to prevent ignition in the first place is going to be really important. So as you all may remember, in the not so distant past, just 4 months ago, there was an election in March, right before the pandemic hit, and voters approved Proposition C, which created and funded the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And it established the organization, the governing body, and a stable source of funding that's going to be dedicated to this coordinated countywide wildfire prevention program. 10 years of funding. That's what we voted in. The Prevention Authority is composed of 17 different taxing authorities, cities, towns, and fire agencies. Only one fire taxing authority did not join the MWPA, and it represents virtually the entire landmass of Marin County and most of the population as well. And it represents, and this is really important and something I think we can be proud of and that we need to actually raise our flag on if we make this thing a success. It represents one of the first, if not the first, countywide efforts in California to approach wildfire prevention, education, and emergency preparedness at a countywide scale and collaboratively. And this effort on our whole part to address wildfire risk together is driven in no small part. Our fire chiefs, our fire professionals know that, folks who have been in the fire world know this, but we as lay people, as residents, I don't think we're as ever aware or as knowledgeable about the risk of wildfire and the fact that wildfire knows no boundaries. It could care less about jurisdictional borders, that's for sure. And it can ignite a home in an urban, suburban setting just as easily as a home that's right up abutting against a wilderness area. So the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority embodies our commitment to really developing collaborative solutions to problems. It recognizes that every property owner, every community has a role to play in wildfire prevention, and that working together, planning and implementing at the countywide scale is going to result in a more sound, sustainable wildfire prevention program and safer communities for all. And this really speaks to one of those questions that came up. What about my neighbor? Is my neighbor doing the work? And the same thing can go for neighborhoods and communities. We need our neighbors, our neighborhoods, and our adjacent communities all to be raising their level of wildfire prevention, defensible space, home hardening, the whole 9 yards. So the primary components of the program include fuel reduction, improved wildfire detection, improving emergency alert and warning systems and education around all of that, evacuation route and planning and safety improvements. And this is both for our fire folks as they go to fires, but also for residents having to evacuate if we are called to do so. It includes low-income grants for property owners who may not have the financial ability to do the kind of home hardening or vegetation management or defensible space work that they need to do. And it includes this really broad, comprehensive public education campaign, of which FIRESafe MARIN has done such an excellent job in the years behind us, and hopefully will be empowered to do even just that much more in the months and years ahead. And then, as Chief Brown mentioned, it also includes defensible space and home evaluations at the private property level. And these might be handled by the local fire department, but also there's actually home evaluators and defensible space evaluators, a team of them that have been put together and are working at the county level as well. So a key tenet of this program is recognizing the importance and the wildfire prevention value of actually having a healthy landscape, a healthy native landscape. And to this end, the agency's been working really closely with a number of environmental organizations. And this is towards ensuring that not only is the wildfire prevention work done in an ecologically sound manner, but then also we're really supporting and educating property owners around the importance of native intact ecosystems that are, in your backyard, in your own backyard landscape. Having a healthy native landscape is going to be a much safer vegetation, a much safer backyard, and beautiful too, than one that is not healthy and frankly is not native. So over the last several months, since the March election, even though technically the JPA doesn't get funded till the second half of the year, the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority has been standing up, getting its organization put in place. There's a board of local electeds. The fire professionals have been meeting, and city managers involved in terms of developing a work plan. And the organization is really standing up quickly in order to take advantage of the time now between now and the height of the wildfire season in the fall to get as much work done as possible. And among that work that is occurring is a major evacuation route study that's been done in partnership with Marin County Public Works and local agencies. Also, as I said, the Defensible Space and Home Hardening Program has been launched, and there are fire safety evaluations happening throughout the community as we speak. Local jurisdictions have received funding. There's a carve out from the wildfire measure that goes to local jurisdictions to address any of their own unique wildfire prevention needs, and this would be in addition to what they already do. FIRESafe MARIN has expanded on its curbside Chipper Day program, which has been going strong for many years, but really more localized in localized neighborhoods. And now that's being expanded countywide. FIRESafe MARIN is also working and expanding its public education program, including this webinar series, and much, much more. So I would again push people to sign up for the FIRESafe newsletter, check out the website, stay tuned to this channel as it were, and continue your efforts and focus on making your own backyard landscape as safe as possible, your home as safe as possible, and getting in touch with your neighbors as well on the FireWise community kind of work and neighborhood work that we need to do. And with that, I'm happy to take questions and or if any come in that are more appropriate for the chief to answer, happy to hand off to him.
Great. Thanks, Supervisor Rice. Appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions just to get you started. All of us living in Marin value our environment. So there are a lot of concerns about what the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority's role might be in making us more fire safe and its impact on the environment. So how can we be sure that the environment is going to be protected as we do all this work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it came up early before Measure C passed, and it's very valid. You know, as I mentioned in my remarks, we all know a healthy landscape is going to be better in terms of fire prevention and fire management than an unhealthy landscape. And we also know that historically, and I would say maybe not so much in recent years, but historically, fire fuel reduction, vegetation management projects that have been done by the fire agencies were not attuned necessarily to creating and stewarding the environment for the long run. So the environmental groups really stood up early in this discussion, very much in support of addressing our wildfire risk, but also advocating to bring in the best science and the best learned lessons around how to do fire prevention, how to do vegetation management in a way that actually stewards and promotes a healthier landscape going forward. That's healthy not just for the critters and the plants that will be there after the fire, but also healthier in terms of reducing wildfire risk. So there's about 70 different environmental climate organizations, fire professionals that have sort of been working together to develop the kinds of ecologically sound practice that will help inform what happens here in Marin County. And I know, and it's frankly built into the JPA's founding documents, actually.
Very good. Well, thank you. Another thing that comes up is there's a lot of talk about individual preparedness, but how should communities better prepare themselves for wildfire?
I think Chief Brown hit on this too. It's one, we know that our home is only as defensible as the home next to us. So that makes the case for neighborhoods coming together and getting their work done. And of course, FIRESafe MARIN supports in a very strong way, in a very big way, the development of our FireWise communities. I don't know how many FireWise communities sites there are now. What are we up to, Rich?
We have about 70, and I think by the end of the year, we may be closer to 80. That's the most of any county in the United States.
Right, so, and 2 years ago, I think we had 16. So these FireWise communities are one great tool for neighborhoods coming together, small or large. You know, it could be 5 homes on a cul-de-sac. It could be, 100 homes in a larger subdivision. But that's a great way, one, to do the fire prevention work, but also doing this neighbor to neighbor, get to know you, who may need some help with something, who's going to be more vulnerable, should there an evacuation be needed. There's also the neighborhood, you guys are going to know this. What is it? The neighborhood, come on, Chief, help me.
Neighborhood response groups?
Thank you, that's it. I think there's something analogous there. And some different efforts around the county that are sort of grassroots, but this is also one of the areas that we want the JPA to be able to step up and support the development of these kinds of FireWise neighborhood response groups, and also, frankly, I want to add one thing on. Something that Chief didn't mention is it's so important that we also are not just reaching out to our neighbors and getting to know our neighbors, but also thinking about our other family members and friends who may not live near us and who may be more vulnerable because they're older, because they're less mobile, may need help planning. So I also want to make a pitch for folks to also be looking out for other folks within their social community, their family community, who may need to be part of an effort of support around wildfire prevention and or just emergency preparedness generally.
Great, thank you. Well, as you predicted, some of the questions that are coming in are still a little bit more for Chief Brown, but the one that you may know something about is all of us went through the power safety shutoffs last year, which was pretty tough on everybody. Do you have any updates on whether PG&E is going to be able to reduce that program or better target it in this upcoming cycle?
Yeah, I can answer that, I think, at a very high level, but not with any concrete commitment on that I can make any promises with. We're being told by PG&E, and in fact, we'll be inviting them to the Board of Supervisors later next month or maybe early September to provide an update on the work they've done towards managing their grid, so that when it comes to, if we do come to a time where there's going to need to be a power shutoff, it's not as widespread as it was last year. They've made some technological changes with their grids that may allow for more targeted shutoffs. My sense is, though, it may be that there's just more targeted get to keep the lights on. So we'll see really how that plays out. I know PG&E has been making a huge effort, and we've all seen it over the last 3-6 months of working their lines, clearing vegetation around their lines around the county. So they're making efforts, but in terms of how they're able to manage power shutoffs, this next season, we're being told it should be improved, and hopefully not as widespread outages, but that remains to be seen. So I think everybody needs to be prepared for multiple days without power regardless, unfortunately.
Great, thank you. Well, we have a little bit of a technical question about the NWPA, so maybe I can help out on this. And the question is, what are some of the local jurisdiction projects that it's going to fund? Just as kind of a quick review for everybody, the MWPA funds are divided essentially into 3 pots. 60% of the funding is for projects that would benefit the county as a whole. So for example, a public education program is not necessarily targeted to a single community, much as what we're doing with this webinar tonight. There's value in it for everybody. There may be larger fuel break projects that work the same way. I live in Sleepy Hollow. When you make a shaded fuel break on top of the ridge between Sleepy Hollow and Fairfax and Terra Linda and Lucas Valley, all of us get benefit from that. So those are the idea of the larger countywide projects. The second pot of the money, and there were a lot of questions about this earlier on, is funding individual home evaluations. And the proper word really is evaluations. This is not a heavy-handed inspection program designed to give fines and citations. This is a program where inspectors come to the property. They don't go in without permission. They look at from the outside. If you're there and you want to allow them to go further, they'll do that. They work with you. But their job is to advise you on improvements that you can make to your property. And they could be very helpful, and the feedback we're getting is very positive. And they've already done literally thousands of inspections. So they're pretty busy out there in all the different communities. The third pot of money is what they call local jurisdiction funding. And this varies quite a bit with individual jurisdictions. So the needs of the town of Fairfax could be very different than the town of San Rafael or Mill Valley, for example. So as an example of the type of projects that they're doing, some of them are vegetation management projects, areas that need to be cleaned up. Some of them involve funding of smaller chipper day events. Some of it is evacuation work where a route might be cleared of the vegetation on the side of the road to make it safer to get through it, or the road may be widened in other ways or other turnouts made in to improve the evacuation. One of the programs that I know that they're looking at in Novato, which has come up quite a bit, is if the power goes out, if the cell towers go down, or if you live somewhere like Sleepy Hollow where you don't have cell coverage, the NOAA weather radios are capable of putting out alert Marin warnings. So it's a backup, it's a battery backup. So if everything goes down, you could still get a message. Some jurisdictions are looking at doing that. So the point is, it's a large variety of projects that are tailored to the individual jurisdictions. So if you're interested in what's going on there, contact your local fire department or your local town to see how they're planning on spending their local allocation of funding. And there will be an opportunity for you to give input on how you think that should be done. So I think that was another real benefit of the program, is to recognize local needs. So we're nearing the end of this part of it. We still have questions that haven't been answered. We'll have another 15 minutes to come back on that. But maybe if I could ask the screen to come up to give you some meaningful takeaways, some things that you can actually do based on some of what we talked about today. Great, so we're calling this the What You Can Do Now segment. As I mentioned earlier, for those who weren't here at the beginning of this, for each of our monthly webinars, we'll have presentations about various aspects of fire safety and preparedness, but we always want to end with a discussion of some of the things that you can do right now to help you get better prepared, and hopefully things that are not necessarily expensive. So one of the things that you heard Chief Brown talk about that we cannot emphasize enough is if we do have a catastrophic event, you're not going to be safe unless you are prepared to hear the alerts and prepared for evacuations. So you need to sign up for Alert Marin. It's very simple, alertmarin.org. When you go there, you put information in for contacts. So for example, phone numbers or cell phone messaging, all the various ways that you want to be notified. There's a lot of options for that. And this is when the highest level alerts and warnings will go out through Alert Marin. There's another program called Nixle, which you can sign up for at nixle.com. That's more for day-to-day information. It is often used by law enforcement for road closures and things like that, but it's another valuable source of information, and it's very active, and quite a bit of material is put out on a regular basis. So the first thing you should do if you haven't done it is sign up for Alert Marin, sign up for Nixle. The second one, and you really heard a lot about this, is please make an evacuation plan. I strongly encourage you to go to the FIRESafeMARIN.org website. You can see it on the screen up here at the bottom. There's a whole section on evacuation. We have checklists. We have everything that you need to know, from how to get a warning, what to do about your car, what to do about the animals, medications, you name it. It's all on there, what you should wear, everything you should bring with you. It's really worth spending a few minutes there. But the real key part of it is you need a plan. If a evacuation order comes out, which means you need to leave immediately, the trick is to be the first one to go, because a lot of people tarry. So if you're the first one, you're all prepared to go, you're probably not going to deal with the traffic jams and all the rest of it. So have a plan, be ready to go. The next one is, please consider working with these wildfire mitigation specialists. That's the formal title for those individuals through Measure C funding who are going to be coming out and doing evaluations of your property. It's not, as I said earlier, it's not a group of people who are out there to cite you. It's not a group of people who are out there to give you a fine. It's a group of people who are out there who are trained to help you to be better prepared to make your home safer. They'll give you a lot of good tips, and it's really worth interacting with them. You'll get a lot out of it. And then the last thing, we hope you'll participate in our FIRESafe MARIN monthly webinars. There were a lot of technical questions tonight that we didn't get to, who dealt with issues like home hardening or fire smart landscaping. Believe me, we're going to have very interesting, very lengthy webinars coming up with a lot of information covering that. We couldn't cover everything tonight. We only had so much time, but this is a way to go through things in depth. Also, a lot of that information, again, is on the FIRESafe MARIN website. It's worth taking a look at. There's some videos on the FIRESafe MARIN YouTube channel. Just type in FIRESafe MARIN on YouTube, and it'll take you to our channel where we have a number of videos on things like so-called Zone Zero, the first 3 to 5 feet around your house, Fire Smart landscaping done by Marin master gardeners, and a number of other interesting videos. They're purposely short. They're about 5-7 minutes so that we get to the meat of the matter with you right away. So all of these are things that you can do immediately to get yourself better prepared. And it's really a takeaway that you should do something about after tonight's presentation. So with that said, you can continue to post questions. Chief Brown, Supervisor Rice, and myself will stay around. We'll all be up on the screen in a minute here, and we'll keep looking at the questions. We'll try to get some more. We look forward to having you join us next month. These are generally, again, as I said earlier, on the last Tuesday of the month. You'll be able to see the schedule and whatnot on our website. And the next topic is going to be on environmental issues and community organizing. So we think you'll get a lot of it. So thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight, and I hope you will stay on for some more questioning. All right. So with that, we'll kind of share the screen with all of us up here on the view, and take a look, go back and take a look at some of the questions. And again, you can continue to put them in. Okay, let's see. I'm going to begin. So here's a question about the inspections, and this is a very typical dilemma. There are people who would like us to be very strict and very enforcement oriented in inspections. To be polite, that usually means how they want the neighbor to be treated, but nonetheless, the question is, should this be, at least at the beginning, more of an educational program and try to work with people, or should we be heavy-handed, give out citations and enforcement from day one? Chief, you have any thoughts on that?
I think we need to strike a balance, to be honest with you. It's going to take a little bit of education, and under circumstances, a stronger arm, whether it's citations or actually having a pool of money where we can actually go in and do the work for the property owner that's not doing it, and then end up putting a lien on the property. that's a potential route that other communities have taken. But that's truly a political answer that, as a deputy fire chief, it really doesn't fall on me. I can advocate for that, but it's going to have to be a balance. And my personal feeling is, if you give people the education to be able to come to a conclusion, they're going to accept that conclusion and have more buy-in to that conclusion than coming in and just tell them this is what you need to do and not have anything kind of.
Great, thank you. So what if you do want
Rich, can I just jump in on that? I think that some of this also may be out of our hands. I think the insurance companies are going to actually start to probably play a role in a different kind of encouragement. I know that that's happened with some property owners that, frankly, anyway. So I don't know if Rich, you or the chief want to speak to that, but that's going to come to play. And then the other thing I would want to add is, a lot of us, this is not necessarily, some of us may have more work to do than others, and at more cost. And my experience with the inspections is that there's, a host of things that maybe a property owner needs to address. And there isn't necessarily, it's not realistic to expect someone to get it all done in 1 year. So I imagine, I think just like our natural landscape and our open space, it may take, a year or 2 or 3 to get our homes and backyards to where they need to really be.
And if I could follow up on the insurance piece that Supervisor Rice mentioned, is we get numerous phone calls where residents are calling us up and saying our insurance company is threatening to cut our insurance, or cancel our insurance unless we get a letter from you saying that we've done our defensible space work. So that is turning into a tremendous motivator. And I want to follow up again on a second point Supervisor Rice made, is that when we come across properties that have just a tremendous amount of work, we work with these people for a multi-year plan. Hey, this is going to be your most important thing for you to work on, so let's tackle this first. And then when you have the means, let's work on this next piece, and so on down the line.
Thank you. And if you do want to get your home evaluated, who do you contact?
Your local fire department is always going to be your best people to call. And if they're part of the entire Ross Valley and the county of Marin are partnering with our defensible space evaluators. And so the agent, if you were, let's say you live in Kentfield, if you call Kentfield Fire, they're going to be able to get you in contact with the defensible space evaluators there. San Rafael Fire has theirs, the Southern Marin areas have theirs, and as does Nevada. So call the local fire department.
Thank you. The issue of sirens comes up quite a bit. And sirens is a little bit of a misnomer. They're really an outdoor warning system. And some people believe that if we have that and we need to evacuate and it's the middle of the night and you're sound asleep behind your double pane windows, that you're going to hear the sirens. Is that realistic?
I think it's yes, it is realistic. I think, sirens were really designed to have people who were outside move inside. And I think it is a risk that to rely solely on sirens for your notification, because if you are asleep, there's a good chance that you're going to sleep through it. Plus, you may not know what it means. And so that's why you need to be in touch in more than one way. You need to have multiple ways that you're gathering information.
Yeah, I will make a little pitch for the NOAA weather radios. We did siren testing in my neighborhood, and we ran into the problem, literally people 2 doors away, if they were inside with the doors and windows closed, even with a loud siren, because of modern construction, they couldn't hear it. If you get one of the NOAA weather radios, it costs about $30, put it next to your bedside, at least on a red flag warning night, make sure it's on. If the power goes off, it has a battery backup, and you'll get the alert and RIN warnings. So multiple systems are probably the best way to go. Another issue that's come up is that in the past, a lot of construction took place in the WUI areas. And I think the question, trying to distill the question here, is there going to be an effort to better regulate where construction can take place and what the safety of the construction is going to be in these areas going forward in California.
Well, as I can talk about the safety of the construction and the current building standards. Generally, we call it 7A standards, and it includes a tremendous amount of home hardening. And I'll use the campfire in Paradise as an example. Of the homes that were built to 7A standards, about 50%, a little bit more than 50% survived. So that's a tremendous piece of data, and that's I mean, it's horrible how many homes that we have been destroyed in the last few years, but though that has also created a tremendous amount of data for us to gather and learn how to improve these building construction methods. And as those new standards are implemented, the communities in Marin have been very aggressive throughout my career of adopting the most current WUI regulations to keep everyone the safest. As far as regulations about when and where people can build, that's the fire service can make recommendations, but we're not policymakers.
And so what about trees and brush that exist in our open spaces, not necessarily owned by Marin County Open Space or the Water District, but we have a lot of large spaces, ranches and whatnot. How big of a threat are trees and brush in those areas for householders, and what can be done about that?
It really has to do with the proximity and what type of terrain, and each location is a very different solution. So there are very different picture. There's not a one size fits all answer to it. Is it overgrown grass that's 300-400 feet away from a home? Well, then it's probably not that big of a threat. What's really important is that you have your defensible space, and if your defensible space backs up, or if your property backs up against a open space in Marin that is publicly owned open space, you can work with that open space owner to extend your defensible space into that property, and that's really the best solution. MWPA also will be working with vacant lots that are threatening nearby homes, and working to get those cleared. That's usually a tremendously difficult endeavor, trying to track down the owners and get them to take responsibility for it. But if it's hundreds and thousands of feet away from structures, typically not going to be a really big problem, except when you start taking into consideration an unhealthy forest. And so if it's a vegetation that is growing in an unhealthy way, yeah, then it's a significant threat and we need to handle that. But if it's a healthy forest, then it's not something to be terribly concerned about if there's a good amount of distance from your home.
And I would just add that I think our land managers, whether it's Marin County Open Space or MMWD or what have you, they are looking, actually they're working, a few of them are working together with a grant on developing a healthy landscape program that also doesn't pay attention to the ownership boundaries. So Mark, you spoke to the fact that we have had fire suppression all this time. I mean, Mount Tam and all of our open space was used to fire coming through, low-level fire coming through probably every 10 or 20 years at some form or format. And that actually made for a much healthier environment and landscape. And so now the land managers are looking at ways as how do you mimic fire if you can't use fire to do your vegetation management, and just recognizing that they're actually need to start gaining back ground in terms of making that open space a healthier landscape altogether. So many thousands of acres out there. So the focus really is on those areas that are abutting the neighborhoods.
So we have a question about support for low-income residents who may need assistance in managing their land, and where they would be able to find information about that. I'll take that one. That's going to be on the MWPA website, which is marinwildfire.org. We'll put the written answer for that. The program is not in place yet because the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is not fully stood up, but that is a program that'll be coming down the road. That's where you would get that info. Go to marinwildfire.org. Another question is, Why is it that a fire that burns in a certain pattern through a certain area, 40 years later, it's going to burn in the same area again? Why does that happen?
I can give you a really, really long answer to this because I'm so passionate about it. But it has to do with mostly terrain and what fuel likes to grow in a particular terrain, but more importantly, how the wind gets funneled through that terrain. And that, first of all, fire wants to burn uphill just by the nature of convection, the heat going up. So the heat is preheating the fuel as it goes up. And then when you get into these drainages or draws, it takes this wind and focuses it and makes it even stronger. And so, and then taking it even on a bigger scale, and you look at these wind events that occur, like that created the Tubbs fire, the Hanley fire, is these north wind events, or some people call them Diablo wind events, and it's called a Föhn wind, which is called German for mountain wind. This wind pattern, or this meteorological phenomenon, is actually as much based on the terrain as it is what's going on with the air or the weather. And so the wind that we're getting for these fires, like on the Tubbs fire night, it started in the northeast corner of the state. And it is always going to start in that area, and it just moves. And as it drops in elevation, for about every 1,000 feet of elevation, it drops, it increases in temperature 3 degrees. Therefore, the humidity is dropping down. So by the time it gets to us, it's bone dry, it's hot, and it's going to funnel in all these draws, passes, and slopes in the same way every time. And that's really what forces the fire to burn the same way.
So I think we've all experienced in life, sometimes it takes a disaster in order for things to actually change. So the question is that what's going to be required to make us change our behavior here? I would just say this: I've been involved with FIRESafe MARIN for about 10 or 12 years now. And I can say once we started having the fires in the North Bay, the level of attention to this issue in the county changed dramatically. So I think we've actually had those disasters. I think people in our county are very aware of them. And I think people, maybe for the first time in years, are really poised to take action. And I think proof of that was the passage of Measure C. That's a measure that was a tax measure in a year where no tax measures passed in California, and that was still funded. I think that speaks to the fact that our local disasters have motivated behavioral change in Marin County. Okay, that's, I think, going to be the last of the questions that we can get to tonight. I do thank everybody for tuning in. I know there's some questions we didn't get to. Please be patient because it takes a little bit of time for us to provide written response to all these. But within the next week or so, we hope to have those answers posted on our FIRESafe MARIN website. I thank Chief Brown and Supervisor Rice. And behind the scenes, as you don't see it, there was a lot of people who helped put all of this together. And I really appreciate the hard work that they've done. I couldn't even name them all, but this is an exciting program. I hope you found it of value. And you'll see that each one of these presentations is going to be quite different. So they're really worth tuning into. And if you're not signed up for the FIRESafe MARIN newsletter, please go to our website and do so. And that way you'll be notified about these events, when they come up, what the topic's going to be, and so forth. So with that, again, thanks to all of you for taking the time for this. And I look forward to seeing you all next month.